Hello, I'm Butch Curry from Zombie Nirvana Games. Welcome to the 5th installment of Fantasy Cartography with Adobe Photoshop, the podcast where I give you some of my favorite tips, tricks, and techniques to make cool maps for your role-playing games. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank all of you for the great feedback I've been getting so far. I really enjoy making these podcasts, but knowing that you guys are enjoying them too really makes it worthwhile for me. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's go ahead and get started. In the first couple of episodes, we created this aged paper background to build our map on. Then we added a forest with a custom pattern and brush. And now that we've got some black and white line elements added, we really need to start thinking about color. One of the nice things about this particular style of map is that if you don't really want to worry about color, you don't have to. It looks pretty good without it. As an example, I'm going to show you this map that I created just last night. As I've been working on the layout for the Fantasy Cartography book, I've been creating a lot of small maps like this just to act as illustrations and serve as examples of some different techniques. As you can see, it's been created in pretty much exactly the same style that we've been working in, but the only color in it is the color provided by the paper background, and it looks pretty good. So if you don't want to worry about color, you don't have to. On the original map that we've been building our map on here, this one, you can see that it's got some nice subtle color in it. The effect that I was going for was as if someone had drawn it in ink and then tinted it, maybe with watercolor. Now, I can't really teach you to be a great colorist. That's something that just comes with a lot of time and practice. There are a lot of really good resources online to teach you color theory if that's something that you're interested in. But that's really beyond the scope of what I can cover in just this podcast. What I can do is to kind of give you a few tips and tricks, a few pointers to help you along the way to make you maybe a better colorist. Now I'm going to just get this out of the way and open the toolbar back up. One of the complaints I hear a lot about maps created in programs like Campaign Cartographer is that they look too cartoony. Now don't get me wrong, Campaign Cartographer is a great program and I've used it a lot myself for many years. I think that the problem with it doesn't lie in the line elements that it creates, but in the colors. If you look at the default color swatches that Photoshop offers, we'll just come up here to the swatches menu. They're not that dissimilar to those offered by Campaign Cartographer or other programs like it. The problem with these colors is that many of them are very strong or even garish. Without a wider selection to choose from, you might find yourself selecting from these really strong, garish colors without even thinking about it. So one thing that you can do right off the bat to make yourself a better colorist is to just give yourself better colors to choose from. We're going to come over here to the Swatches flyout menu. And as you can see, there are a lot of different swatch palettes to choose from. Most of these are going to be better than the default Photoshop swatches. The one that I particularly like is the focal tone color selection. Hit OK there to bring those up, because it gives you a nice wide selection without being overwhelming, and there are a lot of nice, really subtle colors in there. And we'll just go ahead and minimize that back up again out of the way. When you have a better swatch selection to choose from, the next thing that you can do to help you pick better colors is to get a better color picker. I'm just going to select this yellow here and then open it up to show you the picker. There it is. Now the default picker, there's nothing wrong with it, but one thing that you want to avoid is selecting this only web colors. That is a holdover from the old days when monitors could only display a handful of colors compared to the thousands and thousands that they can display nowadays. You don't really need web colors for almost any application that the average map maker is going to use, so leave it unchecked. Don't ever use that. Another trick that you can do with the picker to help you select better colors is to change its mode. Now by default, you select the color's hue by going up and down this slider. That changes the color. And then selecting the saturation and brightness by going into the square here and clicking on different areas. There's nothing wrong with that, but I've personally found that it helps me to pick colors that are less intense by switching to saturation mode, just by clicking on the S here. And now you can see you've got the full range of hues depicted here in the box, arranged by brightness from top to bottom, with the saturation controlled by the slider, just like that. And that really helps me to pick colors that are a little less intense. The one thing that you want to watch out for if you're going to be printing these is the out of gamut warning. That means that this color displays okay on screen, but won't show up in print exactly that way. Something that you can do that's really easy that'll help you avoid that is to go in here to View, and then just come down to Gamut Warning. And this grays out any color that's out of gamut. So you just stay out of the gray, and you will never pick a color that's out of gamut again. As you can see, the high saturation colors are out of gamut. You come down, there we go. There's some nice colors to choose from. So that's a couple of things that you can do with the picker. Now that we've got a good selection of colors to choose from, and we've got the picker adjusted just the way we want, let's go ahead and start adding some color to this map. As you can see, I wiped out some of the forests that we created in the last couple of weeks. I just want to make sure that we've got enough room on this map to add all of our elements later on. So to add our color, I'm going to come down here, and I want to put this color underneath the forest to make sure that it doesn't cover up any of our black and white line art. So I'm going to click on the forest layer and then just control-click by holding down the control button on the Create a New Layer button. That creates a new layer underneath the forest. I'm going to rename this Forest Color. Forest Color. So I can keep track of what it is. And I want a nice subtle green color that I can put in under there. So I'm going to come up here to the swatches and pick a nice green. I'm going to go ahead and open it up in the picker just to make sure it's not too strong. I'm going to come down here a little bit. Right about there looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in here. A little too much. There we go. Next we're going to need to select a brush. I'm just going to come up here, hit brush, bring up the brush palette. You could use one of the watercolor brushes for this, but I find that a lot of the subtlety that the watercolor brushes bring is going to be lost on this heavily textured background here anyway. So I'm just going to use one of these soft-edged brushes, nothing fancy. I'm going to set the mode to multiply. That'll allow the color to interact with some of the stuff that's happening in the background. I'm going to set the opacity down to 30% because we don't want it to come on too heavy. Then we're going to come in here and just start laying down a little bit of color. One of the advantages of working in a style like this is that we want it to look kind of hand-drawn, so if we kind of go outside the lines on the forest a little bit, that's okay, because it's going to kind of help it sell that look that it's been colored with watercolors that have run a little bit. Once you've got kind of a base color laid down there, you can come up here to the color menu, switch the mode to HSB. That'll allow me to control the darkness. I'm just going to come over here and darken this up just a bit and put in a few kind of darker areas around here. You don't have to be real precise, and maybe even kind of lay in a little shadow underneath here. If you want, you can pick another color, maybe a yellow or more yellowish green. And kind of add a little bit in there as well, just to give it a little variation. Just like that. If you find your colors are starting to get a little too thick, you can always come in and reduce the opacity of the layer, just to lighten them up a bit, like that. And that's starting to look pretty good. Zoom back out. And you can see we're starting to get some pretty nice, subtle color in there. That's going to do it for this week. Next week, we're going to dive into a cool technique to add a lake to our map. It's a little more complicated than the techniques we've used so far, but it's definitely worth the extra effort. Be sure to stop by zombienirvana.com for more information about the podcast, my upcoming fantasy cartography book, or if you have any questions, comments, or requests. Thanks for listening, and happy mapping!
Will ye go, lassie, will you go?